Corridors Part 4, Home.
Tara Yang sat atop some fuel barrels and examined Diplomat pelen with interest. The Onathin was perched atop a wooden food crate, quietly preening himself. His blunted beak quickly brushed his green feathers, dislodging old ones that drifted slowly down onto the floor. He raised one arm, exposing the downy wing, and began to preen those with his other arm. The wing extended from the wrist of the Onathin's arm and joined to the midsection of his body. It was jointed, and would unfurl at the elbow when fully extended. Tara noticed that the wing feathers were colored in unusual patterns. Diplomat pelen paused in his preening when he noticed Tara staring at him.
Dr. Yang, anything I can help you with?
He inquired.
Yes, in fact.
Tara began.
I was just wondering about your wing markings. I noticed that they're colored in strange patterns, with blue swirls and red patches in your underwing. Are those common across your species?
It is common for the wing plumage to sport multiple colors and unique patterns,
Pelen explained.
which is why Onathins greet each other with raised arms. It acts as both a sign of friendship and a reminder of familiarity and identity. The rest of the body consists of feathers of one color. However, when an Onathin approaches his senior years, the crest feathers may start to fade to white.
He pointed to his crest with his arm.
And it is seen as a measure of wisdom and life experience.
Pelen shifted his two claws around on the wooden food crate as Tara continued to examine his body. She asked,
Yeah, and about those wings, how come I haven't seen any flying Onathins? I mean, you have these beautiful wings. Why not use them to fly around, instead of walking and gliding?
Diplomat pelen spread his wings.
Unfortunately, Onathins have long lost the ability to fly. These wings are mostly vestigial structures and exist solely due to sexual selection.
Interesting, but why is that?
Tara inquired.
Some say it is due to our dominance over our natural predators that abolish the need to flee to the skies. Some say it is due to our increasingly opulent lifestyles.
He folded his arms and wings again.
So either you are out of practice, or got too fat.
Ambassador Evans was about to apologize for Tara's lack of tact, when Alan's voice rang out over the quiet hum of the interstellar engine.
We're arriving at the Cala system, finally.
Jeremy and Derek looked up at the view screen. The anti-gravity toy they had been examining twinkled softly on the fuel barrel they used as a table. It weakly scattered the rays of the Cala sun around the room as the ship dropped back into normal space. The Cala system consisted of 2 rocky planets, a thin asteroid belt, and one gas giant orbiting a yellow star. The terrestrial planet closest to the sun was a small, hot rock, too close to the sun to support a colony. The second planet was a little too far, and had surface temperatures of roughly 40 degrees Celsius, according to the readings that Alan was reading from the console. An Onathin space station, measuring roughly 50 kilometers in diameter, was parked in between the asteroid field and the gas giant. It was a toroid-shaped station, with a small command module in the center hull, connected by walkways to the outer section. A few small mining ships flew back and forth between the station and the asteroid belt trying to scrape a living.
We're being hailed.
Alan notified. Ambassador Evans got up from his fuel barrel seat and approached the view screen with confidence. He nodded to Alan, who answered the call. A brown-feathered Onathin swam into view.
Greetings, Ambassador Evans. It is a delight to welcome you to our system once again. I have received a transmission from First Prelate Ewardian himself, informing me that you are planning to launch a Pathfinder probe.
Greetings, Station Steward Greedian. You are correct, I will be launching a Pathfinder probe. Has the First Prelate given you the coordinates for the launch?
Evans answered.
Yes, I am transmitting them to your ship now.
A beep notified Alan of the coordinates. He moved to designated coordinates, located about 1,000,000 kilometers above the Cala space station. Jeremy fidgeted in his seat, eager to get started.
Steward Greedian, I trust you have a good vantage point from your station. We will be launching the probe momentarily,
Evans informed.
Yes, we are observing you now. I must admit that I still do not fully comprehend this Pathfinder project. I understand that it is a form of interstellar travel, but little beyond that.
If our test is successful, we will board the station later and explain the project to you. You are also welcome to listen to our communications as we broadcast them for the entire system to hear.
Evans assured.
Agreed. May the winds blow in your favor.
Station steward Gredian cut the transmission. Alan shifted in his seat.
All right, Jeremy. So compared to engaging the interstellar engines and flying towards Earth, what do I have to do differently if I want to use the Pathfinder probe instead?
Ambassador Evans flipped some switches and broadcasted their entire dialogue to the system. Jeremy replied,
Well, actually, you basically just launch the probe and wait.
That's it. I don't need to align the vector to Earth correctly. Don't need to check if I have Sol in the crosshairs.
Alan took his hands off the controls, bewildered.
Yeah, the Pathfinder probe does all that.
Wait, I think I'm missing a lot of stuff here. When I engage the interstellar engines, I still have to navigate and make sure we're on course while we're traveling. If the probe is doing that, then how do we engage the engines and follow it?
Oak, there's some misconceptions here that I should clear up. Let's start with how Onathin interstellar engines work. First, when the engines are engaged, they will wrap the spaceship in a superposition field.
Jeremy began.
A what?
Evans asked.
A superposition field. Basically, the field translates everything within it into a matrix of linear equations that represents our location and all other possible locations, which would then allow us to interact with the wave functions of the local universe directly, and, with careful manipulation, we can use to travel to destinations at speeds that seem faster than light.
Jeremy explained. Derek looked at everyone else confused expressions and clarified.
Basically, the field turns us into a state of here but not here, and then the engines to tell the universe that we're most probably there and not here.
He looked at Diplomat Pelen's cocked head.
I guess that didn't really clear things up, did it?
The point is
Jeremy continued.
That the standard interstellar engine inches along by extending the field forward, allowing us to appear forward while we disappear in our previous location when we close the field behind us. We actually travel forward through a series of discrete jumps. But since we're operating outside of normal space-time, it feels like one continuous journey. This is why Alan needs to constantly monitor our journey, or we would end up off course.
Ugh, let's pretend that made sense. How is using the Pathfinder probe different? I know that it was based off of normal interstellar engines, so I assume it uses the same physics.
Alan wondered.
The Pathfinder probe does use similar physics, but its operation is quite different.
Jeremy drew in a breath while everyone winced for the incoming nonsense.
The Pathfinder probe also extends a superposition field around itself and travels to the destination in almost the same way, by navigating the wave functions and jumping forward in a series of discrete jumps. However, it does not close the superposition field behind it to jump forward. Instead, it leaves behind a small portion of itself in the trailing fields, while sending most of itself forward.
Everyone looked at Derek.
Well, I guess you could either describe it as leaving breadcrumbs in space-time, or that the probe basically smears itself across the universe in a statistically implausible way.
Derek shook his head. His clarifications weren't really helping. Instead, he walked over to Alan's control console, pressed a few buttons, and launched the Pathfinder probe. The sleek, elongated probe featured 3 stabilizing fins and looked like a long dart with a bulbous end. It glowed white as it activated the interstellar engines and encased itself in a superposition field. It shimmered a moment, before seeming to shoot off into deep space. A point of glowing white remained. Jeremy continued.
So the probe leaves a portion of itself behind while it navigates through the superspace to its destination. Once it arrives, the Pathfinder will reactivate all of the breadcrumbs, which would then form a path through the superspace that we can then use to instantly travel to our destination. We would enter the superposition field on our end and appear in the field at the destination as soon as the origin field collapses. Basically, we would essentially be doing one big jump in the time it takes to do a small discrete jump.
Ugh. So, how long do we have to wait?
Alan asked, eyeing the glowing white point suspiciously.
Well, how long does it take for a spacecraft of the probe's size to travel to Earth using conventional interstellar engines?
For something that small, maybe 4 hours?
Alan estimated.
Unfortunately, it will probably be longer than that.
Jeremy explained.
The method at which it travels through the superspace is less efficient.
Then what's the whole point of this project?
Evans asked.
Well, at first we developed it because it would save interstellar fuel. You would be using fuel to form the path with the small Pathfinder, and then your big ship could make the jump with almost no fuel expenditure. In our tests within the Sol system, though, we discovered that the Pathfinders seemed to take less and less time to find a path when we kept using the same origin and destination points.
Jeremy explained.
The travel time kept diminishing?
Diplomat Pelen chirped.
Yeah, we thought it might be due to the number of breadcrumbs that were left in the superspace. Although they eventually decay, we theorized that they leave an imprint on the universe's probability distribution, which would make it more likely for subsequent Pathfinder probes to find and use the same path.
Jeremy scratched his head. He was using path and find too much in his explanations, but couldn't come up with a better term.
So, the more the probes are used, the faster the travel time will be?
Evans inquired.
Perhaps, but we think that the actual act of traveling on the found path is what decreases subsequent pathfinding durations.
Jeremy answered.
So what do I do?
Alan asked, hands back on the controls.
Well, now we just wait. The telemetry I'm reading says that the probe is working as intended and will arrive at Sol in about 5.5 hours.
Rather than spend more time on the cramped prototype spaceship, which still didn't have a name, the humans and their Onathin Diplomat spent the time touring the Cala space station. Their initial trip through the system consisted of refueling and resupplying, and there wasn't any time devoted to exploring the space station. Since it had been their first time out of the Sol system, Derek and Tara had been especially disappointed that they couldn't marvel at the wonders of an alien space station. The other humans had already flown to Cala before with even earlier versions of their prototype interstellar engine. While some small amount of marveling was done, Derek and Tara were largely disappointed with the Cala space station. The gray walls that lined every hallway and room always seemed a little grimy, with beak scratches and claw marks haphazardly dispersed along the walls.
I don't know if it's because we were spoiled by the Onathi marketplace and the Onathi space station, or if this place actually looks run down.
Derek remarked to Tara as they walked down a hallway behind the rest of the group. Tara glanced at the passing shops, noticing that the number of shiny trinket advertisements were startlingly sparse. She looked at the other side of the hallway and saw giant ore processing machines churning and spitting out soot and smoke into an overworked ventilation system that seemed ancient.
Well, Cala is on the fringes of the Onathin sovereignty, and the prelate did say that it barely had any economic support.
Derek sneezed. Pieces of fine down whirled around in front of his face. A small collection of multicolored light feathers ruffled in the corner as they continued to walk toward the center of the station.
Definitely more floating feathers here than at Onathi. Either that or I'm catching the space flu.
Tara took out a small metal tube and jabbed it into Derek's nose.
Ow! Hey!
Nope, not the flu.
Tara said, looking at the data that was populating the side of the tube.
But there's definitely something here.
She frowned and grabbed Derek's arm, pulling him toward the others. Ambassador Evans was speaking to Station Steward Greedian regarding the Pathfinder project.
The telemetry we've received indicates that the Pathfinder probe is well on its way to the Sol system. Once it arrives, it'll create a path through which we will use to instantly travel to Sol.
Remarkable. The usage of Pathfinder probes for interstellar travel does have its merits. While the probe is charting the journey, You may conduct business aboard the station.
Steward Greedian raved.
And if the probe's travel time does indeed decrease with more frequent travel, trade between our two systems can only get more and more efficient.
And more lucrative.
Ambassador Evans stated.
Tell me more about what the Cala station can offer in terms of trade.
Steward Greedian raised the volume of his chirps as they walked by noisy machinery.
Cala station houses and supports mining ships that travel out to the asteroid belt. They mine the ore and bring it back here to be processed. The miners pay docking and housing fees, as well as any maintenance costs associated with the ore refinery. The station would buy their ore, either in the raw or refined form, and sell it to traveling merchants that travel to the inner systems to sell the materials to manufacturing plants, shipyards, and other space stations.
I see. What about these stalls and booths?
Evans gestured to the dilapidated storefronts lining the hallways.
It looks like this station was meant for much more.
Indeed. When we first scouted the Cala system, we thought that we could extract hydrogen from the gas giant and process interstellar fuel for ourselves, making us more or less self-sufficient.
Greedian's crest deflated.
Unfortunately, the clouds of the gas giant emanate lethal ionizing radiation, a fact that was previously overlooked during the initial scouting report. This effectively stops any harvesters from approaching, preventing us from producing our own fuel.
Steward Greedian gestured to the downtrodden shops.
Since we could not produce fuel, we had to buy it from the inner systems, Zechid for example. However, Zechid also needs fuel for itself, meaning that the supply of fuel to Cala is uncertain at best. Without a steady stream of available fuel, merchants and miners were discouraged from traveling to Cala. No one wanted to be stranded in a backwater system that doesn't even have a colony.
Ambassador Evans nodded.
And without the merchants and miners, there was nothing to generate revenue to attract more merchants and miners.
His eyes twinkled as he looked at the depressed Onathin steward.
Humanity can help you there.
You mean because of the Pathfinder project?
Correct. Steward Greedian.
Evans explained.
The use of Pathfinder probes for interstellar travel consumes very little fuel in comparison to standard interstellar drives. As such, humanity will soon produce much more fuel than we need. Cala only has one gas giant it could ever possibly harvest from. Our home system has 4.
Station Steward Greedian's eyes narrowed in shock.
How fortunate. Then it is settled. We will trade minerals, ores, and processed components in exchange for a steady supply of interstellar fuel.
To jumpstart the partnership, we could even let Calan harvesters into the Sol system to collect from one of the gas giants, for a fee, of course.
Ambassador Evans offered.
With the newfound fuel, I have no doubt that Cala will attract more merchants and become a major trade hub between Earth and the Onathin sovereignty.
Both of them smiled as they continued walking through the station. Behind them, Jeremy and Alan had stopped to inspect one particular storefront that displayed an aquarium. Inside the water was a most peculiar creature. Its 2-meter-long body was iridescent with fish scale-like structures, punctuated with 2 limbs in the midsection, 2 limbs near the rear, and 2 wing-like features between the sets of limbs. The limbs themselves were about 1 meter long, ending with a webbed eat. Jeremy and Alan watched in wonder as it sprinted forward in the water by pushing with its wings, folding them as it rushed towards them, before opening again to stop instantly. The creature's head had 3 eyes that seemed to have 2 sets of eyelids each, with the inner eyelid being transparent. More fins and whiskers decorated its face, around a mouth that contained rows of vicious teeth. Diplomat Pelen inspected the humans' faces with interest as they gazed at the strange creature, noting their childlike wonder.
Hey, Diplomat Pelen.
Alan pointed to the creature.
What is that?
By now, Derek and Tara had caught up, and Ambassador Evans and Steward Greedian had walked back to investigate the holdup.
That
Diplomat Pelen gestured towards the creature with his beak.
is a Drinel.
The Drinel swam as close as it could to the glass. Derek shook his head.
I feel funny looking at it, like I can't really focus on its face.
A tear streaked down his face.
It's trying to communicate.
Pelen explained.
It's intelligent?
Ambassador Evans asked, softly sniffling.
That's correct. The Drinel are an aquatic species that communicate with ultra-low frequency vibrations.
Pelen turned to face the humans and noticed a few of them had started to leak water from their eyes. Tara coughed lightly, swallowing a lump in her throat.
I feel really sad right now, and I don't know why.
She wiped her tears away.
Is it because of the ultra-low frequencies that it's emitting?
Yes, every Drinel you meet will most likely be very depressed and saddened. Unfortunately, strong emotions such as these are involuntarily broadcasted, affecting nearby life forms as well.
He studied the humans.
Although I've never seen their broadcasts affect another species so intimately before.
Another thing to report to the first prelate, he thought. Station steward Gredian spoke up.
Is this the first time you've seen one? They're pretty rare nowadays, and when they do crop up, it's usually bad for business. Wards away all the customers with their depressive moods. You would only find them in the outer systems, since the richer inner systems drive them out.
Ambassador Evans touched a hand to the glass. His fingers hummed inaudibly.
But why are they so sad? Where did they come from?
Diplomat Pelen narrowed his eyes.
You don't know? I assume the first prelate would have said something.
The humans turned to look at Pelen.
What do you mean?
Derek asked. The green Onathin gestured to the Drinel with his wing.
The Drinel Republic was once a civilization that spanned hundreds of star systems. They lived near the outer edge of the galaxy, and were great trade partners with the Credith Dominion, as well as the Onathin sovereignty. They were always fair and honest in their trade deals. But then the Forsaken invaded their worlds.
Forsaken?
Evans asked, turning again to look at the mournful Drinel. Its eyes stared balefully into his.
An unknown enemy from beyond the galaxy. They attacked the Drinel Republic without warning, destroying many colonies before a fleet was raised against it.
A drop of blood trickled from Evans' nose. He absently wiped it with his finger, and looked at the blood on his fingertip with bewilderment. Within the dark red orb, he saw images of black, sleek warships dropping into normal space around a serene blue planet. The dark fleets reached out with maroon lasers, cutting vessels, ships, and space stations to pieces. The night sky around the Drinel homeworld became alight with new stars as the Forsaken destroyed ship after ship. Satellite after satellite. Huge, ominous capital ships glided through the explosions and laid waste to the planet below. The calm blue oceans became raging rapids and tsunamis as dark red pulses detonated repeatedly in deep water. Hurricanes spawned from the onslaught of the orbital bombardment as the oceans of the Drinel homeworld boiled away. Silently, the Black Armada sailed away, moving on to the next system, leaving decaying carcasses floating in the churning waves. They silently bumped into each other, cadaver land masses forming against a forlorn, liquid backdrop. The cerulean oceans were replaced by dark brown seas of pooling Drinel blood. Evans watched as the crumpled bodies were deposited as jetsam against roughly hewn shores. He stumbled and fell against the glass when the stench of a dead world filled his nostrils.
Tyler.
Jeremy and Alan steadied the ambassador as Tara rushed forward, brandishing a handheld medical scanner. Evans waved her off.
I'm fine. I think I just saw the Drinel homeworld.
He stared at the Onathins with wide eyes.
They were destroyed?
Yes, unfortunately.
Pelen squinted at Evans.
They were strong fighters, resisting the Forsaken for 20 journeys, before their republic finally succumbed to the invasion.
How many are left?
Derek asked quietly.
The current census estimates that approximately 9.3 million Drinel reside in the Onathin sovereignty and the Credith Dominion, mostly scattered along the outer worlds.
Derek groaned slightly as his stomach turned. An interstellar civilization, spanning hundreds of worlds, spreading out across the stars over millennia, reduced to less than 10 million individuals in a third of a fleeting human lifetime. He pulled Tara close. The level of devastation the Drinel Republic faced was unimaginable.
Following the destruction of the Drinel Republic, the survivors fled to the Credith Dominion. Unfortunately, Many ships were destroyed before they could make it to the Renteller star cluster. Many more ships simply failed, their water recycling systems giving out from the amount of refugees their ships carried. They dropped out into normal space above Kratith planets, filled with floating bodies.
Diplomat Pelen folded his wing.
When the Forsaken started invading the Kratith Dominion, they started moving into the Onathin sovereignty, desperate to get away from the Forsaken.
Why haven't they tried to start over?
Jeremy asked.
A lack of resources combined with a scattered population makes that task almost insurmountable. The Kratith initially tried to find a world for them, but soon became embroiled in a war with the Forsaken. The Onathin sovereignty is similarly devoting all resources to fund the Kratith, and simply didn't have enough available resources to transfigure a world for them.
Steward Gredian informed.
My station is a testament to these austerity measures.
Evans placed both hands on the wall, leaving a small red smear on the glass. The Drinel pressed its fins against the glass in response.
What is this one doing here?
Another grimy, brown-feathered Onathin stepped out of the store as if in response. He had been nervously watching from within the doors, hoping for a sale. Diplomat Pelen handed over a translator. The Onathin storekeeper explained.
Greetings, I am Sedin. I have an agreement with the Drinel. I would provide him lodging and food, and in return, I harvest the biochemicals he secretes and sell them as supplements.
Terra eyed the dirty water and frowned.
Is this really his native environment?
Sedin's crest deflated.
Granted, it's not ideal. I try my best, but I can't afford anything better. I barely make enough to feed my hatchlings.
The humans looked at Ambassador Evans. The solution was obvious to everyone except the Onathins. Evans spoke, keeping eye contact with the Drinel.
The surface of Earth, our homeworld, is mostly covered by vast oceans.
He summoned an image of his home in Vancouver, an apartment looking out over the calm Pacific Ocean. He remembered a scuba diving trip in his earlier years, swimming amongst the colorful fish of the Caribbean. He pictured Earth, a blue-green world, misted with swirling white clouds. The Drinel rippled, its scales reflecting an orange hue. Its emotions washed over Tyler Evans. Nostalgia, longing. Jeremy's diagnostic tool beeped.
The Pathfinder probe will be entering Sol in about 15 minutes. We should be back on the ship when the, path is found.
The corridor.
Derek said quietly.
What?
We should be back on the ship when the corridor stabilizes.
Derek answered. Evans nodded. He faced the forlorn Drinel again. Come with us. We will rebuild the Drinel Republic together, on my homeworld. On our homeworld. The Drinel rippled again, changing from orange to a forest green. Its tones sang out his sentiments. Hope. Home.